you all for joining this Women in Tech event. I feel very honored to get to be a part of these every time I'm invited, so very excited. Today we're going to talk about business analysts, the role of business analyst, and how those roles bridge the gap between technology and the business. And I've got a couple of folks here with me. So let's see here if I can move my screen forward here. All right, so today's panel, we've got Elizabeth Howard. She is a business analyst who's going to come in and talk to us about her experiences there. We've got Sonia Morin. She is currently an engagement lead, but she's a former business analyst and has had a really long and interesting career path too. So she's going to talk to us about her experiences. I'm Hannah Farley. I run the change advisory practice at Hitachi Solutions. And so while I haven't been a business analyst before, my team and I work really closely with business analysts, and they provide a lot of value to us in terms of like driving that business value, right? So it's great to see you all. Elizabeth and Sonia, if you want to, is there anything else you'd want to say about yourselves past the introduction?
Thanks, Hannah. No, I just wanted to say I'm really happy to be here, and I've got a couple sidekicks with me, so apologize if I have they interrupt, but really excited to be speaking with all of you today, and I'm very happy to be talking about the business analyst topic.
Love it. That's awesome. And we're very happy to have your sidekicks. That's part of being a woman in the working world, right? Sometimes you have sidekicks.
Absolutely.
Right. Elizabeth, anything you'd want to add?
No, me too. I'm just excited to be here.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So for today's discussion, we've got three. We're going to break this out. Really, it's more of an interactive discussion. So I'm going to ask you guys some questions too. And our slides are really just to facilitate, what we want to cover. So first, business analysts. Let's get down to the nitty gritty. What are they? How do they provide value? What skill sets are required, to become a business analyst? What are the salary ranges? Things like that. So really breaking it down from that perspective. And then the next piece is going to be the journey to business analyst stardom. And so Elizabeth and Sonia are going to walk us through their career journeys and their paths, because as we all know, like no one is the same. Everybody can have a different journey to end up in the same position. And so we want to get their take and their personal experiences in the field. And then we're going to do question and answer session for any curiosities you may have. Does that work? I love the nods. I'm looking at the room. Awesome. Okay. So business analyst, the nitty gritty. All right. What is a business analyst? So I'm going to poll the audience. I know some of you guys may not have your laptops, but if anybody wants to come off mute, does somebody want to take a guess on how we would describe a business analyst, what that may be? Anything? And I'm not monitoring chat. I think, Alex, you might be able to monitor chat. I don't think I can see this. Or Elizabeth, help me with that if you can see the chat. All right. So we'll go on over to the definition here. Or are you taking your... Go ahead. Go ahead.
My girls were we were talking. So say it again.
Someone who uses data to help businesses.
Yeah, someone who uses data to help make decisions and help businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. That's absolutely it. Does anybody else have any other definitions or additional input there? All right, let's dig into it. So excellent answer. So this is a quote I got from, so thank you, Chat GPT. I don't know how many of you guys have access to that. My husband introduced me to it and it's my new favorite thing, but I plugged in, what is a business analyst? So it's pulling all this information, from the internet because there are so many different ways to describe a business analyst. And so to really break it down simply, it's, in the tech industry, it's kind of like a detective who helps companies make better decisions by looking at data and figuring out what needs to be fixed, right? So you guys are spot on in the room. What is a business analyst? And it really is looking at that data and figuring out how to make the best decisions. think of them as someone who helps a company run more efficiently, just like a doctor helps keep you healthy. So I loved that very quick analogy. But we know that business analysts do a lot more, right, than some of those things. So this is a sentence, whereas ChatGPT first gave me maybe 10 paragraphs on what a business analyst is. And I said, I just need a sentence, right? Like, how would you describe this in an analogy? So I do love this one. Before we move on into some of the skills and things like that, Elizabeth and Sonia, do you guys want to elaborate a little bit more on what a business analyst is to you and what you've done in your jobs as a BA?
Sure, I'll go first. So to me, my favorite part about being a business analyst is connecting people who work in the business, so salespeople, people who are providing customer service, those kind of roles, with the people in IT who can help get them the technology that they need to do their jobs well.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I always think about it as for me, the benefit that I've gotten from working with business analysts are they're the liaison, right? Like from the technical teams to the business teams. And so they speak a little bit of both, and they're able to take that information and translate from the tech information into something that's really digestible from a business perspective, and vice versa, right? Like taking requirements from a business perspective and helping translate those into where they may be, requirements to develop new systems, right? Processes, input on those types of things. Sonia, is there anything you'd want to add?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna piggyback a little bit off of Elizabeth. Is one of the things that I really love about business analysis is your exposure to so many different industries and processes. It's always something new and it's always something changing. And that's what's so cool about this role. And so it really can help you build a foundation of skills that can be expanded upon and built upon, that can lead you to a lot of maybe unexpected career opportunities and career growth. I think the other piece of being a business analyst is having the conversations with the stakeholders. Elizabeth is 100% right. Your job is to translate business requirements into something that we can build for IT, for technical folks to consume, and then have a great output. But through that, you get such great exposure to different types of people, different types of stakeholders, and you learn how to adapt and work with a variety of different backgrounds. And how do I be successful with each person, each type of background, each situation? So you learn the agility and adaptability to be successful, regardless of your environment, your surroundings, your stakeholders.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's awesome. All right. Okay, so top skills. So Elizabeth and Sonia both touched on this a little bit in walking through, what it's been like for them as a business analyst. But we've got some of the major top skills here, and so I don't mind to walk through these. But Elizabeth or Sonia, would you want to touch on some that you think are maybe Elizabeth take the top role and elaborate on any of those if you'd like?
Sure. So I'll start out kind of right to left. So requirements gathering and documentation, definitely super important when you're talking to a lot of different people in different aspects of a company. So talking to people in IT on the technical side, talking to your stakeholders, like Sonia said, with telling you exactly what they are looking for. You want to make sure that everything is clear to all parties, that it's written in a way that they can understand, and that you have copies of that so that you can look back to it in the future as well. So that's definitely an important aspect. Communication goes along with that. Written communication, verbal communication, just being able to sit down, have a conversation, and figure out what does a stakeholder need from me, and what do I need to let other people know in order to make it happen. And then data analysis has probably been one of the smaller parts of my job, but it's definitely important to make sure that what you're doing, to measure the impact of what you're doing, And then also a lot of the systems that we're using is collecting data, using data. So just able to make sure that it's working properly. Those data analysis skills come in handy.
Awesome. Sonia, do you want to take the next row?
Absolutely. So I think for any contributor for a project, it's good to have a sense of what are the operations piece of a project. That's where project management comes in. Because as a BA, there's so many different moving parts, and you need to ensure that you partner with the actual project manager and or make sure that all of the stakeholders, developers, people associated with the project know what they need to do in order to be successful. So it's a lot of people coordination on top of requirements coordination and processes. But having a great idea of what the PM does helps you work more efficiently with them, as well as just be more efficient in your own role with all of the moving pieces. Problem solving is huge because as a business analyst, we're constantly interviewing people with their needs, with their requirements. Those are always changing, and we always need to be analyzing all of the information they give us, because part of our job is to help solve that problem. Now, we may not know the ultimate design or solution, but we can partner with IT to come up with that. But it's great to be able to analyze things, pick them apart, find the root cause of why. We always say as business analysts, you always want to ask why, because a lot of problems that are given to us, the business can't find the why on their own. And we have the conversations to help drive that out. And then business acumen, kind of going back to what I was talking before, being able to flex and adapt your skills to work with different types of people, different stakeholders, and having an understanding of the full breadth of the process to make sure that you and your team are set up for success.
Excellent. Are there any questions about skills before we move on? Are any of these skills surprising to you guys, or do you think we missed out on any that you would think would be included here? No? Lots of head nods. I love it. Okay. All right. So types of business analysts. So Sonia, I'm going to let you walk through this one, if you don't mind.
Sure, absolutely. So thank you, Hannah. I actually wanted to add this slide here as a talking point, because when you say business analysis or business analyst, that's such a broad term. And I wanted to show just the breadth of what you can do and accomplish as a business analyst, and especially kind of looking at that from a career path perspective. No worries.
Sorry.
So as a business analyst, there's so many different types of business analysts. There's more general business analysts who can talk more business as well as technical. There is more process business analysts who really focus on business process improvement and outlining strategic vision. And then there's a more tactical or technical business analyst who may be a little bit more tech savvy. There's a lot more flavors of business analysts, but there's just not one title that you have to do it all. There's definitely specializations within this title, within this field. And as you start practicing as a business analyst, getting involved with the different organizations or different groups of stakeholders, you start to learn your strengths and your interests to help develop that longer term career path. So I wanted to put this slide up here because you can see the core here is business analysis, which gives you such great exposure to so many great business practices. But it can grow into things like enterprise architect. It can grow into things like CIO, like CEO, like CTO. It can grow into head of product or a product owner role, because these core skills of business analysis are incredible and applicable to so many different career paths. So honing these skills now and being aware of those different skill growths and career pathing growths can help you kind of see what's possible by taking the investment in learning some of these key skills that can span across different industries.
Excellent. And I do love that you added this slide, because I do think it feeds into some of the conversation we're going to have about the next slide and some of the interest there. So before we move on, are there any questions here for Sonia about this slide? Nope. Okay. All right, salary range. So I'm going to give you a disclaimer on this, right? There's tons and tons and tons of information about salary ranges. So I pulled together really some of the big averages here. So there are a couple of questions I'm going to ask and poll the audience on this one. But if you look at this slide that Sonia just showed, and the different kinds of business analysts, right, where you could have like a certain niche background for that. And also other factors, right, that we've talked a little bit about. So when you think about VA salaries varying, right, they can vary greatly. What are some factors that you think could contribute to salary variances for business analysts? Anyone? I'm going to call on someone in Amy's room. Thanks, Amy.
So I'm not gonna lie, I was maybe in my office grabbing candy.
That's perfect. Okay,
Can
so
you repeat the question though?
For sure, for sure. Okay, so I'm getting ready to talk through a little bit about the salary range for business analysts, but the salary ranges can vary greatly, right? Depending on a lot of factors. What kind of factors do you think might feed into a salary varying?
Go ahead.
Like location where you live.
Geographic location.
That's right. That's right. Location's
Okay.
one.
Yep.
College education.
So are these all bachelor level?
These are it's so when you're looking at this part, like it's kind of across the board, right? Varying by experience and all that. But so bachelor level education's right. That's another.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
I see your industry, what industry you're in. Cause I would imagine I saw you wrote that in the chat. I was thinking, I always tell my kids this, like, if you have a skill that not everyone can do, that makes it worth more money.
That's right.
Right?
Yep. That's right. And industry, is a really, really big factor too. I think probably as much as like education and experience and location. And so when we look at these salary levels, like average entry level salaries are between like $40,000 and $60,000. When I think about some of those at the lower end, my experience and some of the things I was seeing, if you work in government or higher education institutions, things like that, they tend to be a little bit lower on the spectrum. Whereas if you work for a product company, a little bit higher. And then if you get into like consulting companies and tech firms, those will really be the highest from an industry perspective. And so these things kind of run the gamut here. So, entry level to mid-career and then experience. And I put the 100,000 plus because the more experience you have there, and depending on the industry. So if you have a knack for consulting and you like working with different organizations all the time, there's a lot of income potential there that I think does go way above the 100,000 plus mark, for some areas, depending on your expertise. Okay, can anybody tell me what the average salary is for a business analyst? And I still can't see my chats. So if anybody.
We're it's like Price is Right. We're saying 80,000. We're guessing.
80,000. Any other guesses? So close. If we had a prize for getting it without going over, I think is that the Price is Right deal? Like you have to catch it without going over. 75,000 is the average. Is the average salary for a business analyst. You kind of run the gamut, but that's a really, really, really good guess and close. All right. Is there anything else, like Sonia or Elizabeth, you'd want to add here from a salary perspective?
No, I think that about covers it. There are just lots of different components that go into that calculation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nothing else to add on my end, except, you hit the nail on the head with, with your experience with the industry, that the power that you have to increase those numbers is pretty substantial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
About salary. So I have noticed, obviously I'm nearing retirement, but my daughter is 29. And I've noticed that with like her age group and even the young people who just going to college and maybe our high school students, they're really changing the workforce in terms of like demanding salary transparency.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just curious, like, because there are all these different ways that you can have a better salary, like, how does that work? How easy is it for you to know going in, like looking for a job, if they aren't posting the range, or they post the range and you want to know, well, how do I get the most in that range? Are there professional organizations? Like, how do you figure out what is the right price to ask? This is a big question, I know, but maybe some thoughts. I'm just curious.
Okay, so let me give you my thoughts, and then Sonia and Elizabeth, you can chime in also. So I think it was at the end of last year, they've just passed a law where there has to be salary range transparency posted on all open job descriptions starting January 1st of 2023. So if a job was posted prior to January 1st, it may not have to have that disclaimer on leveling and salary, the range there. But now my understanding is like anything going forward, the range should be posted. So that should get you in the ballpark, right? Now, understanding, what you're worth. Again, it's when you look at a job posting, sometimes I think about myself, like when I've gone out to apply for jobs, and I can tell if I'm on one end of the spectrum or, a little bit lower, like on the range, right? And so I think you can judge based on your experience and your education level and all of those things in the job posting, like what you could qualify for, if it's like more towards the upper range or lower range. I will tell you, this is my personal belief. A few years ago, as an established career woman, I took a women in finance class, and in this finance class, we had women who were really required to be very transparent about what they were making and their finances and things like that. And that's something that growing up, we never disclosed. We never talked about like what we made. And we always kept that really private. And so, to me, I've seen a shift in going to more of a culture where people share what they make, because how do you know like what you can make if you don't know what other people are making, right? If you don't have that opportunity to see that. And so, when I took that women in finance class, I think we left, and a big group of us stayed together. And because they recognized that other women were making more in this area and more in this area, the majority of the class came out with like pretty substantial salary increases, because they went in and they did their research on what they were worth, and they saw that other people were making more because of that transparency, and were able to go request that for themselves. So I don't think I fully answered your question. I just gave you my perspective on some of that, Amy, but I'll let.
No, that was super helpful. I think I get what you're saying. Like, to a certain extent, you kind of have a hunch of how well you qualify for the job, and if you have all the skills they're describing, that helps a lot. And I think maybe that's just a me question, but they're high school students. They don't know either, right?
Yeah.
I don't think.
Well,
you know that? Yeah, we don't know that. But also I'm in an industry where we have a scale, like, Lane and I mean, I know how much I'm going to make because that's just how it is. I can't negotiate more because I'm awesome. I also don't make less if I suck. I don't know if that's good, but anyway, so it's very different from my perspective. And so I can't always give good advice for that. So I think that's super helpful.
yeah, absolutely. And I will tell you that I've read a lot of research, about these things, and just being a woman in tech, right? You're in kind of a male-dominated field, and I forget what the stats are. You guys can look this up, but there's something like 80% of men will apply for a position that they're only like 10% qualified for, right? Because they're like, yeah, like I think I can take that on. Whereas like most women won't apply for a position unless they think they meet every single piece of criteria and will be able to do it without question, right? And I think we're seeing a little bit of a shift in people thinking like, hey, I want to stretch into this, and applying for different roles, from that perspective. But I will also say, for each of you, I spent a long time not negotiating salary. I didn't realize that that was a possibility and a thing that I could do for years. And then when I started doing it, I realized like there's a lot of opportunity, right, to go show the value that you bring and negotiate your salary that's going to be commensurate with your experience and your educational background and the value that you can drive to that organization. So always negotiate and always aim high. What's the worst they can tell you, right? They're not going to do that. And then you can negotiate a little bit lower. Like aim higher, aim for higher than you think. That's just my perspective. So, Sonia, any additions here?
I think that's all great advice. And I'm glad you shared the story of men applying for jobs they're not always 100% qualified for, because I was thinking about that same story. But one thing I just wanted to add in here is, I know money is obviously one of the most important things when you're reviewing jobs and applying. However, I think that's also a shift that I'm seeing is there's other factors that are equally as important as compensation, such as flexibility in the workplace, such as PTO, maybe benefits. You know, if I'm making 100K but working 100 hours a week, am I really making 100K? You know, so it's also just good to look at other factors besides just pay when you're looking to apply for jobs, because those other things can really be meaningful and contribute to your overall total compensation and your happiness in your career.
Absolutely. To tag on to that too, I would say culture is a really important thing, right? Like if you go to an interview, dig in and ask about their culture and figure it out, because, you know, to Sonia's point, you know, we spend a lot of our times working, right? Like I spend more time working than I do, you know, with my husband or my friends or my dogs. Like that's just sort of like the bulk of what I do. So I want to make sure the culture is great and I'm working with really great people. And that's important too. And I think we've seen, Sonia, like you said, you've seen that shift where people are demanding more of a work-life balance, right? And they want a culture that they're going to fit in, you know, well with, that's really supportive of them, you know, in their development and things like that, to where you're not just a number, right, producing something. So Elizabeth, did you have anything you wanted to add there?
If there was a magic answer, I would be happy to share it with you. I wish somebody would tell me. But yeah, like they said, it varies. You have to ask for more than you're worth. I have a friend that says, don't tell yourself no. Let somebody else do it if they're going to, but don't just assume, don't tell it to yourself. As for how much those other benefits like PTO or flexibility are actually worth at a job, it can be hard to do that calculation, especially if it's not the situation that you're currently in. It's hard to figure out, you know, what would I pay for that, or how much would that be worth to me? There's a book, I hate to give specific recommendations, but there's a book called Your Money or Your Life. Not everything in it is going to be applicable or helpful, but there are some calculations for how to figure out, you know, what that's actually worth to you.
I love that. I would like to read that book myself too. Your Money or Your Life. I think too, I'll share just a quick little another antidote, because I think this is really, really important. So everybody listen up. If you stop listening, listen up, because this is a big one about salary negotiations. I was probably 10 years into my career, my professional career, and I got a job offer, and they were asking me what salary I wanted. And for some reason in my brain, I just immediately thought to say, like, actually, why don't you tell me your range and I'll let you know if I fit in there anywhere. And they told me their range, and I was blown away. I couldn't make a face at what their range was, because I was going to sell myself so short on this salary. And so I was like, yeah, I'm about right in the middle, right? When they gave me the range. And I got a job. That next job took me to 2.5 times my original salary. And if I had just told them what I was making, right, I wouldn't have gotten to do that. If I just told them what I was making, or if I was like, oh, I want $10,000 more or whatever that might be, then I would not have made out. And then I realized, like, whoa, this is what people make. Like, these are the salary ranges that we don't have that transparency to see. So do not sell yourself short. And that's the power of negotiation. And don't plug yourself in a hole either. Ask for the range and let them know if you fit in there or not, right? Because if it's way too low and you're not going to fit, that's okay. But you're not taking any chances by asking for the range and then letting them know where you fit. But you are if you just give them a straight number, right? So anyway, that was a giant lesson learned for me that I wish I knew a decade before I knew it, right? I had a lot of missed opportunity. So again, I digress. That's taking us away from the business analyst chat, but I think it's a really good, tidbit of information for women as they go in to negotiate. All right. Any other questions from a salary perspective? All good? Okay. All right. So now we're going to go on a journey to business analyst stardom. And so I may actually stop sharing my screen here so we can kind of highlight Elizabeth and Sonia. But I'm going to have each of them talk to you about their journey and their career paths. Either one of you guys want to start?
I can go ahead and go first. I was thinking a little bit about how far to go back in my role to business analyst. But I'll say that I think it probably started in college. So in college, I always had 1 to 3 part-time jobs. And a lot of those were in the service industry, being a server. And I really think back to that time in my life where that's when I started cultivating and building all of my skills that have helped me so immensely today. And what that is people management, understanding multiple requirements at once, and building the soft skills. So as a server, you go in to your shift, you see 6 different tables. You're determining who needs what first. How do I alter the way I'm communicating to each table based on if they have kids, or maybe they're on a special date night, or if there's 10 people who look like they're starving, right? So you're doing some stakeholder analysis, which is a BA tactic, figuring out how do I communicate and be most effective and efficient based on what I know about these different people in this different environment. Then, of course, you get all of these requirements. You have to keep them all straight, figure out how to organize them in a way where you can be as successful as you can for yourself and for all of those people around you. And then lastly, you're massaging your soft skills and building those soft skills, figuring out how do you get as much tip as possible from each one of those tables, right? For one table, you might need to be very short, direct to the point. Other ones want to sit and have a conversation with you. But that's when I really started building my skills and noticed that I really need to work with people because I love all of this and I love all of the constant change and challenge in my environment. And actually through serving, I built out a really great network, which brought me to my very first role at a very large organization and started as a BA on their service desk, putting together an internal management system for their IT support. In that role, I will say, that role sounds simple, but always, even if it is entry level, what I had done and what I recommend for you to do if you choose the route of BA or anything, always find opportunity. During that time in that role, I found so much different opportunity for process improvement, for mentors, for going above and beyond in my role that showed the business that I was able to accomplish more, that I had more talent to contribute to the organization. And so in turn, they invested that in me, training me to become a CRM administrator, then a business analyst. I got into consulting, did consulting and software implementations as a BA, as a functional solution architect for years, and eventually built up my experience and leadership skills to allow me to act as an engagement lead on projects, which that term is more of, I guess, director of projects. So running projects, having those C-level executive conversations, and really holding a lot more responsibility in an IT organization. So that's it in a nutshell. I know I spoke a lot, but again, I feel like everyone's journey can be different. If I can give you any advice, always look for opportunity. Always be proactive in asking for what you want. I just loved, Hannah, your stories about asking for that higher salary. I was someone who I always was asking for promotions, or what else can I do, or how can I continue to grow? So to be proactive in that. And honing in those soft skills. Soft skills are so critical to business analysis in any business career, but that can get you really, really far. And those are things that are harder to learn and less people have those skills. So focusing on soft skills, you can always read a book and learn the technical skills. Those are important as well. But the soft skills, I think, is a great focus as and will make you really successful in a BA career.
I love that. I have to second the soft skills too. It's so important. And especially when we think about, I mean, this being women in tech, right? In the technical field, we work with a lot of like very brilliant, technically minded people who may not have some of those soft skills. So when we work with clients and business analysts, you are bridging, right? You are bridging the technology to the business. And so having those soft skills really goes a long way in making you successful and making your project successful. So I love that. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Elizabeth?
All right, yeah. So it's actually really funny how similar kind of my starting off point in my journey was to Sonia's, because I was working at a fast food restaurant in high school and I had no idea what I wanted to study in college. I knew I was going to college, but I didn't know what path I wanted to go down after that. But I knew that I loved being able to serve people, anticipate their needs, and kind of, it was fast food, so just get them through the line, feeling like they had a great interaction, but as efficiently as possible, and really just being able to understand what can I do for this person today. So knowing that, I went to college to study accounting, completely unrelated. But in the College of Business, we had computer information systems, and everyone took a few basic courses. I started out in that path. And I thought, well, I'll add information security as a major. That sounds like it goes along with accounting. Highly technical, so I'm not really sure what I was doing there, but it started me down the computer information systems path. And then I added on business process management and web development. And along the way, I got an IT internship where I was able to go into a small manufacturing firm and get to learn their IT processes and get to learn their business processes, which I had never set foot in a manufacturing facility before then. It was a really new experience for me. So just getting to know the people there and what it is they do and their information systems. They asked me to come back later on. They needed help building out their CRM. So this is the big database that manages most of their sales interactions and their customer relationships. It's customer relationship management. And so they brought me back on that project. And that's when I really got to hone the skills of gathering requirements from users. At that time, it was such a small firm that I was, kind of doing some of the configuration and development myself, and a lot of the data work and testing, and getting to see the whole process from start to finish of how do we get our technology to meet people's needs. And honed in on the part of it I liked best, which was the solutioning and the requirements and learning the business process from people. And that brought me forward to where I am today.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Does anybody have any questions for Elizabeth or Sonia? Well, I'm going to jump in and share a little bit about my background there too. Very similar, actually. I think to both of you all. Like, I started out serving, while I was in college, and really took a liking to that, developing soft skills, figuring out how to work with different customers. You can kind of become a chameleon of sorts, right? Figuring out like how to interact with different people and different personalities. But while I was serving, I was in college, getting my psychology degree, right? Because, I don't know what you do with a psychology degree. At the time, I thought this was amazing. I'm going to definitely go and use this. Maybe I'll become a psychiatrist. I'm not sure. I graduated college and I immediately got a job at a university working in finance and budget. So not at all psychology, right? But it all kind of bridges this gap and comes together. So while I was working there, I worked my way up to finance and budget director for the College of Agriculture at this university where I was working. And our College of Agriculture had 3,000 employees. And I had 60 departments that all have business units rolling up to me. And historically, everything had been done on paper. if they did travel vouchers, if they had to submit expense reports, if they were looking at their budgets, it was all printed out on paper for them. And we were going to be implementing new finance and operating software. So these people who worked at this organization for 30 years managing their business on paper were now going to have to go in and use a system that was very complex, right? These are people who didn't use email, right? And all of a sudden they needed to go in and start using this very intricate system to manage all of these things they'd managed, for so long on paper and they thought weren't broken. And so I realized at that time, if I wanted to get through this change and this shift in technology with all of the employees that I had at the time in those 60 departments, I needed to figure out a way to kind of help them bridge that gap, right? And help facilitate moving them through the change so they could be really successful in the new future state of the organization. And what I didn't realize I was doing at the time was organizational change management. And so while I had that job, I actually went back and got a master's degree in HR and organizational development. There's a big, heavy focus on organizational change management. And again, I didn't know that was a thing or a career necessarily. But, it kind of feeds into what Sonia and Elizabeth have been talking about from a business analyst perspective. Like I realized, at part of this project, there were BAs on this project, right? Because they had to go into the businesses, departments and units like mine, and talk about our business needs and take those and translate them into requirements so the technology could do the things that we needed to do to keep our business running. And so they were like the business analysts I had on those projects were, a really huge part of our success because from a change perspective, I needed to understand how people would be impacted so I could go prepare them, right? And get them ready to really move through the change and feel supported, when the time came. And so I'll tell you all of this, from a change management perspective, because I haven't been a BA, but the BA role is very, very important. But I tell you this because part of the goal of this call today is to let you know that you don't have to be highly technical to work in tech, right? There are all kinds of roles that feed that will provide different opportunities that drive value, for these different companies and different industries today. And you don't have to be an F&O architect or a functional consultant, right? Like you can be a business analyst, you can work in change management, there are big learning and development organizations. Like we've got a practice for learning and development because as we implement technology, people need to learn how to use the new technology and the new processes. And BAs feed that too. If they've been working on business process, like we need to make sure people are trained on the new way to do things so their company's getting that return on investment. And so I just wanted to plug that in there to kind of tie it all together, that there really are tons of opportunities. And it brings me back to that visual that Sonia plugged in on the different types of BAs and the different niches, because there are so many different ways that you can go with this. Let me go back. So I'll share my screen again. Not that let's see. Can you see it?
I can't see anything yet.
Okay, I think it's a little bit slow.
There we go.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so trying to figure out like a visual to show for the journey to be a stardom, right? There is no one journey, there is no one path. Like we're all going to have vastly different paths, but when you think about like that personal growth, there are just so many ways to go and do that and drive value. So we just want to highlight that with these stories. I do know there's one question that Elizabeth actually came up with that I have not polled the audience for yet. So before we move on into our Q&A session to see what questions you have, we've got one last question for you all. What percentage of business analysts are women?
Can I shout out a number? I was going to say, can I just say like maybe 40?
Yeah, 40. Do we have any other guesses? 90 and 20 in the chat. Okay.
Another 40.
Another 40. Okay. Any others? Well, 40 is the closest. The 40 is the closest. So that one's going to be the winner. 50%. So Elizabeth did some research the other day. And I pulled it up and was able to replicate it too, where they're from a business analyst perspective, they're roughly 50% women and men as a gender mix in the field right now, which is, it surprised me. I thought it would be much, much lower than that. So it was a really surprising statistic. So I love that it's 50-50. I love that some of you are guessing 90% women. That's amazing. And I love that we were getting close to 40 because I think I would have probably guessed maybe 17%. So awesome job. All right, let's see here. Now for our Q&A question or Q&A session here at the end. So before we wrap up, what are your burning curiosities? What burning questions do you have for us?
Can I just shout another one out right now?
Yeah.
I'm kind of wondering, like, as a business analyst, are you more likely to be employed, as a temp worker, as a consultant, on a specific project, or is it, when you get a job as a BA, is it more long term? That's my question.
Well, I can tell you, like, my perspective on that. Again, I'm saying this as never having been a BA, but working with them on projects. We are seeing kind of an uptick in, I would say, like the gig world, right? Where people are more contractors. They want to come in for specific projects. But in my history, BAs have been more permanent positions because they get to know the businesses really well, the business process. They become those great liaisons. And so they're usually pretty long-term positions. But they're also, if we think about industries and consulting, you have BAs that may come in as a part of a project that aren't a part of that organization specifically. So I think it could be a mix of both, Brittany. Sonia, Elizabeth, jump in here if I'm mess that up at all.
No, I think you're spot on. It partially depends on where you want to be as well, because I would say larger organizations have more permanent BA positions. To Hannah's point, once you get in there and learn the business and learn the processes, that intellectual property is so critical to the business that they don't want to lose you, right? They'll move you maybe to different divisions or business units within the organization, but they want to keep you around because you know their business so well and can articulate that business process to IT. And some BAs are very happy in that type of role. They like to be in that same organization. Where other BAs, such as myself, I like the constant change. So that's what drove me to become a consultant is, you're on a project for maybe a year and a half, and then you move on to the next organization, which is fun because you're learning about so many different types of organizations and their internal processes, but can also be a lot more challenging because there's never such thing as a comfort zone. It's always changing, and it really depends on. I think there's opportunity in both areas. I think they're equal, but it really depends on where you kind of want to grow your career. Something a little, and it, I say, I'll backpedal once more. It really just does depend on the organization, but think about that. If you do select the career path of business analyst, think about, do you want that constant change? Or maybe it's best to start at a larger organization to get your feet wet, to have that comfort, especially in your early years.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Thank you.
We have another question in the chat from Amy. So it seems like all of you solve problems, and that seems to be the focus of your work. What brings you the greatest satisfaction in your work?
That's a really good one. Who wants to take that one or go first? I don't mind to take it for my job, but again, I'm not a BA. Go ahead, Sonia.
I'm sorry, Hannah. Yeah, I'll chime in here because I immediately know the answer to this one is a lot of times BAs, after a solution is built or after the technology is complete, we are the ones presenting it back to the business, back to the stakeholders. And during those demos and those presentations, seeing the eyes light up and faces, have huge smiles because now something that took them 20 hours is going to take them 1 hour is realized and they see it. So it's really presenting our work back to the business and seeing how this change is really going to improve their lives, what they do, and help them to be more effective and more efficient in their careers so they can continue to grow as well.
Yeah, I think for me, and again, the business analyst role does feed into this, but if we think about, what Sonia just said, she said, so they're feeling good about the change, right? The change is a big thing because anytime, a BA is engaged in something, there's some sort of a shift that's going to happen and that people need to go and adopt. And so for me personally, I feel like I get the most satisfaction when I know I'm helping someone succeed in their new future state, right? Because change is really hard for people to go through, even if we're creating efficiency, so something doesn't take them 20 hours. Like sometimes there's a little fear associated with that. Like if this doesn't take me 20 hours, what's going to happen to my job, right? And maybe it's really just that they need to go do this more value add activity. And so if I can go help them or my team can go help them be really comfortable and understand how they're going to provide value in the new future state, how they're going to go, work and really have them feel supported, then the company gets their return on investment, but I get that satisfaction from the helping people part of it. Elizabeth?
I would agree with the both of you. Helping people, seeing the end product, seeing people's faces in the end product. But I also really like that moment when there are lots of challenges in this job and any job. When you're trying to nail down the requirements and you're working with your stakeholders to figure out exactly what it is that they need and what the final result would look like in their eyes. And you go back and forth sometimes for a long time to figure out what would make everyone happy. And when you finally get a solid answer, it can feel like a big win. Or when you're talking to the technical team to figure out, well, how are we going to fix this problem that we finally agreed on? It can be complicated. You might need to learn a little bit of the technical side that you didn't know. And when you come up with a solution that seems like, everything had been on pause while you try to figure this out, and now we can move forward and now we can take the next big step to solve this problem. Those kind of little wins every day feel really good to me.
All right. I do want to be cognizant of time since we do have 2 more questions left. So the first one is from Barissa. Did imposter syndrome ever get to you? And if so, how did you overcome it?
I
still have it all the time.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Same here. Yeah. And I think there is no magic answer. Again, like if there was something that I could tell you to just make it go away, I would say it. But I think that's where it goes back to, like, don't tell yourself no. There are plenty of men that think that they're plenty qualified for what you're doing, and you're probably more qualified. So just keep that in mind and do it anyway. If somebody's asking you to do something, it's because they think you can.
That's exactly right. I love that. And it does go back to that. If you think about someone who might apply for a position not having the qualifications, whereas we want to have all of them, right? Sometimes we can think we're imposters, especially when we have to stretch a little beyond what we're currently comfortable doing, in a profession. But I would say, I think you're exactly right. Like there's no magic bullet for it whatsoever, but trust yourself. Don't tell yourself no. And then when you think about it, like, there are all kinds of other people that are probably doing the exact same thing, and there's a good chance you're doing it better, right? That's what I tell myself. I'm like, hey, look, like I'm trying at this. There's probably a good chance that I might be doing this better, and sometimes I am. So trust yourself and trust your gut on those things. Sonia, what about you?
Sorry about that. I was struggling with my mute button. I agree wholeheartedly with everything Elizabeth and Hannah said. I think every day we're challenged with situations where we may have to act a little bit like an imposter. But if you take that and instead of be demotivated by that or feeling down, and take that as a motivation to grow your skills and be better next time, that's all that will ever be asked of you, is to continuously grow, continuously learn. If you're uncomfortable, you're doing something right. There's a saying that I always like to kind of tell myself: the more you're uncomfortable, the more you're comfortable with it. So put yourself in uncomfortable situations, because the more you're uncomfortable, the more comfortable you will be.
That's all right. I love that. Okay, we have one more question.
Yes, one last question, which kind of is built off Sonia's answer. So if you want to advance in your career, move up in terms of responsibility and pay, what are the most common next steps for a business analyst?
Again, I'm not a business analyst, but I think I have some solid advice, right? Be visible with your work. Make yourself visible. Sometimes we get, and this is part of that comfort thing too, Sonia was talking about. I think when I was younger, like I wanted to do my work, but I didn't want to be visible. I didn't want to show up and present. I didn't want to do stuff like this, right? And I was totally fine working in the background. But if you want a promotion, people have to notice you and notice the contributions that you're making and the value that you bring. And so make sure you're showing up and you're highlighting, hey, I did this, like be visible. I think that's a big thing for me. But in terms of like, just like from a business analyst perspective, I'll let you two take that one.
I agree with that as well, Hannah. And I think for myself, I've been very, very fortunate to have had amazing mentors throughout every single position. So I also encourage you, find a mentor, find a coach, find a couple, because people naturally want to help people. And building those relationships shows that you're proactive, that you're serious, that you want to continue and to grow. And again, showing that initiative day in and day out, having those mentors, if opportunities come up, those mentors will help you. And I am where I am today 100% because of the people around me, encouraging me, coaching me, making me better. So leverage that. People want to help people. They want to see you succeed.
Yeah. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Rely on the people around you. People want to help. Put your name on things. Make sure that people know if you're doing great work. Make sure that you're taking credit for it, of course, and give credit to those around you as well who are helping with that. And that's really how you can move up to the next thing. And in terms of what job title that next role might have, commonly for BAs, really it could go in any direction. I'm newer in career, so Hannah and Sonia might have better answers than I do, but there are lots of different directions you can go. You can kind of get more further into a niche if you're headed that direction, or you can move kind of into a more consulting role like Hannah's talked about. There are lots of different ways you can go.
I think the skill set too for being a really good business analyst lends itself well to leadership, right? So I think, it sets you up for having those soft skills and communication skills and being able to translate between a business, and the technical teams, prepares you well for leadership. And then I would just add one more thing, to advance your career and whatever you choose. Be self-aware and ask for feedback and put your ego aside. There's no ego. I tell my team we hire no egos whatsoever, right? We put it aside because we all want to go seek to improve and be better, and really ask for honest feedback and take into account what you're told, right? Because we all have room for improvement. I'm constantly learning something new every day, having been doing this for 18 years now. So just, your self-awareness will really go a long way too there.
Awesome. I want to thank you guys so much, Hannah, Elizabeth, and Sonia. It's been such a pleasure for you guys to host this Business Analyst Tech Talk Tuesday. I'm going to take screen sharing over from you, Hannah.
Yeah.
Okay. Next month, Tuesday, on Cyber go over in February 28th. So please sign up. But otherwise, everyone is all good to go. And I really appreciate it. And have a great night.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you all for having us.
Take care.
Thank you.